What's going on, everybody? Big Jugs Tactical here today. I'm going to show you how to replace a Glock 17 trigger, or really any Gen 3 or 4 Glock, with the Apex trigger. There are a lot of benefits to the Apex trigger, such as it feels a little bit less two-stage without really losing any of that safety that a Glock comes with. The overall trigger face is a little bit thicker, so it's a little more comfortable to actually pull with your finger. And overall, it feels a little bit more smooth, and it takes off a little bit of that pull weight. So let's go ahead and jump into the how-to. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is to remove the slide from the frame. To do that, it's just a regular breakdown. Pull the slide about 1/4 of an inch back. Pull down on the takedown button. Slides right off. I'll go ahead and put the slide up top. The next thing we want to do is to remove the pins. So we have the primary trigger pin, the locking block pin, and the trigger housing pin. I'm going to go ahead and start with the locking block pin. I'm going to use my 1/16 inch punch to go ahead and do that. Should just push out. Just like that. I'm going to use a rag to grip it a little better. There we go. Put that up there. And the next thing I'm going to go ahead and take out is the trigger housing pin, which is here in the back. The last pin that we need to remove is the primary trigger pin. That is the larger of the pins right here. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch punch since it lines up a little bit better. So the trigger pin actually holds in the slide release button here, so you might need to wiggle it around a little bit. You don't need to push super hard on this trigger pin. You just need to make sure that this is lining up correctly, so it might take just a second to get them lined up. So I'll go ahead and push with my punch on the pin while wiggling this guy around and work to find where it should line up. There we go. Go ahead and punch it out the other side. So then your slide release, you can just lift up. Go ahead and put this to the side. Go ahead and move our pin out of the way as well. Okay, and then we have the locking block. So to take the locking block out, which is this little usually shiny piece of metal here, you can pull up on the trigger bar, which is just this piece here, and it should kind of pop up that locking block there. Mine's supposed to be in there a little bit. So if you can't pull it up and actually lift this piece up, I usually just take a punch, slide it underneath there, and pry it upwards, just like that. And then you can go ahead and pry it out. There we go. So this is the locking block. I'll go ahead and set this to the side. So now we can go ahead and remove the trigger assembly. So with that, you can go ahead and just pull on the ejector here, and it should take the whole trigger assembly out. So there you go. That is the stock trigger assembly. So I'll go ahead and put this to the side as well. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is to remove the actual trigger bar and the trigger from the trigger housing. For the Gen 4, and this is not the Gen 5, it's Gen 4, you go ahead and just kind of turn the trigger out. Just like that. Pull up and back to rotate that spring around, and then go ahead and just disconnect the spring here just by unhooking it. This is a little oily here. There we go. After a little bit of work. So we have the trigger housing, and we have our old trigger and trigger bar. So I'll go ahead and put this off to the side. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to remove the factory disconnector, which is this silver piece here. Should be able to go ahead and just pull up on it. I'm going to go ahead and use a punch to get behind it. and it just pulls right out. Go ahead and put this off to the side. Okay, so then we can go ahead and take our apex disconnector and just push it right in. There we go. Just like this. Alright, so the next thing that we want to do is to go ahead and put our trigger back through this loop here. Let's go ahead and get it just so it lines up correctly. There we go. Go ahead and pull it forward. And then rotate it back in, just like that. There we go, so it looks just as it did with the old trigger bar. I do want to bring up an important point here. Make sure that you did lubricate right here at this corner of the disconnector. That is actually recommended by the Glock manual as well. If you didn't remember, go ahead and just pull that up, drop. I used a little bit of EWL, dropped it in there. That is important to remember. So with this assembled, we can go ahead and drop our trigger back into our frame. So to do that, it's just going to be reverse of how we pulled it out. So go ahead and drop it right in. We're going to sit the housing in back here. We're going to line up the trigger. It should just push right in. There we go, just like this. So then we're going to go ahead and reinstall our pins. To start, I'm actually going to, let's put our locking block in first. That would be important. Go ahead and push that in. Okay, so for our pins, we're going to go ahead and start with the locking block pin. The reason being, the spring here on our slide release will get in the way if we try to put this in first. So let's go ahead and use the locking block pin first. Go ahead and push this guy through. Go ahead and line it up. Okay, I'll use my punch just to get it even on both sides of the frame. Okay, looks good. So the next thing we're going to install is the trigger pivot pin. So I'm actually going to go in from the right side to line up this trigger first. So go ahead and push this through. Not all the way, because we still need to install our slide release. So we can see that the trigger is lined up. You can see it is rotating on that pin. So we can go ahead and install the slide release. So now this spring here needs to go underneath this pin right here that we put in, that locking block pin. So go ahead and push that so the spring folds just a little bit. Now that we have the room, we can see that the pin is underneath our pin, or our spring is underneath our pin here. So again, go ahead and push while you're wiggling the slide release. That way it can find where it should be linking up. Kind of see it with the light there. There we go. Pushes right through. Go ahead and just even it out as well. Just tiny taps to make it even on both sides. So both of these pins are good. The last thing we need to do is go ahead and install our trigger housing pin. So I will go ahead. Hopefully I can push this in. There we go. Alright, I'll use my 16th inch and just do light taps. There we go. Nice and flush. Alright, so we have installed the trigger. So the next thing we need to do is install the safety plunger as well. Okay, to install the safety plunger, let's go ahead and strip the upper assembly here. I'll take the recoil spring and the barrel out. Put those off to the side. Next, I'll go ahead and take the striker out. So I'll go ahead and push down right here. So I'm pushing down on this piece of plastic here. While I'm pushing down, I'm sliding the back plate essentially pushing down on that piece of plastic releases spring tension. That way the back plate can come loose. Okay, so we can pull out the striker. Pull out this rod here. All right. Lastly, we can go ahead and push in the current plunger here and pull this guy out. And then the safety plunger will just come out here. So this is the stock plunger. Go ahead and remove the spring. Just pull on it. And we can put the spring into our new safety plunger. Go ahead and give it a press. If it doesn't stick, that is not really a big deal as long as it goes in correctly into the slide. So to do so, go ahead and we will reinsert, make sure the spring stays lined up. And go ahead and depress the plunger, keep it flush with the slide. We can reinsert this guy here. And then release the plunger. And then we can see the spring is working, looks good. So we can go ahead and reassemble the upper. So let's go ahead and put this rod back in as well as the striker. Just like that. And then we can go ahead and reinsert the back plate. So I'm going to use the punch here, the 16th inch punch. And I'm going to push down on this piece of plastic first to go ahead and line it up. That is also in upside down. So let's not make that mistake. There we go. Knew something didn't look right. All right, let's do that again. And there we go. We have our new safety plunger. Go ahead and put our barrel back and our recoil spring. Works like a charm. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content and maybe learned something from it. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for more content. If you have any suggestions, go ahead and head down to the comments. Let me know what else you want to see.